Hi, and welcome back to a new episode of TLDR, CISPA's first podcast series. TLDR is short for Too Long Didn't Read, and we chose this title because we want to save you the hassle of reading long research papers. We do this by directly talking to our researchers about their work. My name is Tobias Ebelshäuser from CISPA's Communication Department, and joining me today is Sahar Abdelnabi. Sahar is a PhD student in the research group of our faculty Mario Fritz, where she works on machine learning with an emphasis on deepfakes. Sahar is currently working on ensuring that deepfakes have certain characteristics, certain fingerprints if you will, that make them distinguishable from the real deal. And as Sahar will tell us, that is something that does not only apply to pictures and videos, but also to written texts as well. So, hi Sahar, and thank you for taking the time to talk to us.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
Before we start going into too much detail, in case some of our listeners don't really know what exactly a deepfake is, would you mind explaining it to us?
Yes, of course. So I think the term was mostly famous for these videos where they show celebrities, I think we all seen the videos of Tom Cruise or Barack Obama saying something that they didn't really say, or in a context that they haven't been in that context in real life. But I think also the term is applied to any form of generated media, computer-generated media, like images or maybe even text and articles. The term deep, I think, refers to using deep learning in general technologies and generating these forms of media. And fake probably refers to that it's not real. It's just some fake generated thing. It's not genuinely true image or article. So they might have a lot of cool applications like in entertainment or art or video or image enhancements. So it's not all bad. But as we all know, they might have also some malicious applications. If someone is trying to sell something that may be provocative or offensive or harmful to certain people, and they want to sell this as true while it's actually fake. So if someone has a bad agenda to it.
Yeah, so maybe just let's add to that, a bad agenda. Let's say I see a video of a politician saying something they didn't really say, and that is provided all over the internet. Can you go into a little more detail on how these videos are being generated? How does that work? How can I how can I produce a video of someone doing something he or she didn't do?
Okay, so I think currently there are some sort of open source softwares that you can use to do these sorts of deepfakes. The main root of technology, if you're asking about that, is something called, at least for images and text, something called generative adversarial networks, or GANs in short. And if we want to go a little bit into the details of how they work and just an overview, they are sort of more two competing actors. Someone, which was the generator, so it's sort of a network or a model that we wanted to generate images, for example, and it takes random noise and it should generate the image. And this is also the training of this generator is done in collaboration with another factor or another actor in that play, sort of, which is the discriminator. So the discriminator is trying to say if the images that are generated by the generator, if they are true or not. So the discriminator takes the generated images and also takes some bunch of real images out there, and it tries to tell them apart, basically. We train these two networks against each other. So I guess there is a famous example that if someone is trying to forge money, that is the generator, and the discriminator is like the police and wants to know if this money is forged or not. And as we train both, they both get better, and ideally they reach some sort of equilibrium, and by the end of the training, the generator should ideally produce realistic images as much as possible. So we are trying to learn the true nature or the true distribution of the images by having this two-player game, the generator and discriminator. This can be applied to images and can also be applied to videos. So we can record a video of me, for example, and then translate it to another target, which would be another person, for example. And I think we can train these models and then probably sell them as a software. And if malicious actor can use this software or even train their own model, they can apply this technology in harmful applications.
Okay, maybe let's get back to that equilibrium between the generator and the discriminator you were talking about. So does that mean that the generator is generating images that the discriminator part of the model cannot tell from real images, or how does that work?
Yes, ideally, in sort of way, we want both actors to be strong. So we want the discriminator to be strong in order to give meaningful feedback to the generator. And we also want the generator to generate meaningful images. And during training, we have to ensure that both players are strong enough in order not to get some sort of imbalance between the two. And this equilibrium is, of course, when they are both sort of strong enough in order to produce meaningful images, and the discriminator should also have meaningful feedback.
You also said that someone can train this model themselves. So you said someone can buy a model, or they can train this model themselves. What would they need to build their own model if they want to do something malicious?
Yeah, so theoretically they can, of course, train their own model, but I think it's getting harder to do so because they would need really large amounts of data in order to produce realistic images. And they would need, of course, a technical experience. And there are a lot of tweaking of the specific parameters of these models. And this would translate to many, many hours of development of these models. And they would also need very expensive hardware in order to be able to train these very high quality models. So training, for example, the recent language generation technologies could cost millions of dollars. So I think if we are talking about low skilled or even medium skilled malicious actors, I think training these models is getting harder and harder.
Okay, so let's say right now I come across a video or picture that, let's say it's really well faked. Is there a way I can say that this is a real image or not? Well, so
there might be some clues or some inconsistency cues that you can observe. But I'm talking historically. So historically, you might observe that if the person is not, if it's a video, for example, the person is not blinking well enough, or maybe the lips is not synchronized with the lips movement is not synchronized with the voice. And for images, for example, maybe you can observe some fine details like the hair or maybe the teeth or something. But I would say that relying on these sort of inconsistency cues is not very reliable on the long run, because some of these examples that I'm telling you, they are probably now just way better than before. And if you just observe the generated images, for example, a couple of years ago, you would really see the difference, but now it's really getting harder to spot these differences. So I would say it might still be possible to do so, but it requires a lot of maybe paying attention to fine details and just trying to train yourself to do it, which probably is not accessible for everyone, and they still might fool a lot of people.
But right now, I mean, there are a lot of deepfakes. I mean, there's even this website, it's called This Person Does Not Exist. I'm sure you're familiar with that, which just whenever you refresh the site, it shows you a new picture of a person that is entirely computer generated. And I can just say, for me, it is really, really hard to tell if these are real people or not. If the link wouldn't literally be "this person does not exist," there would be no reason for me to doubt this person's existence, right? So right now, is there a way I can tell that it isn't real? I mean, in a technological way, because I for sure cannot with my human eyes.
Mm-hmm. Yes. So currently, there are already some solutions that are based on machine learning that they try to discriminate between real and fake images, for example, or even real or fake text. And for images, they show good generalization already, and they might even detect generators that they haven't seen during training. For text, it's still a little bit trickier because you probably wouldn't generalize that well to other text generation platforms or other text generation technologies. But for images, I would say that it's probably more promising to use these models. But in my opinion, or the whole motivation of the fingerprinting and watermarking scheme is because these technology are based on the assumption that it's easy to tell, or there could be some patterns to tell the real and fake. And with time and with the advancement of technology that we have already seen in the past few years, so if we learn something from that, then we can probably say, if we just predicted the future, given the past observations of the technology of these models, that the generation of images and text are continuously improving, and continuously they generate better quality for images, generate better articles, and so on. So for now, they could work with some extent, and they might be used already. But in the future, I would argue that it's not very reliable to completely rely on them, because we don't know how would they generalize to future technologies.
Okay, but this is where your work comes in, right? So you want to make sure that an image or a video or even a text that comes from a certain model is identifiable. Really, to just say it bluntly, that you can say this is a deepfake or this is not a deepfake.
Yes. So the idea here is that as the gap between the real and the deepfakes is getting narrower because of the advancement of these technologies, we want to be proactive about it and insert some artificial differences that we can observe. But probably when I say observe, ideally, it will not mean that you can observe it with your own eye, because we still want to keep the quality of these generations. If it's used for like image enhancement, for example, we still want to have a high quality, or like if it's a text and you are having a sort of assistive editing, we still want the model to be useful. So we want to observe these differences, but not by human inspection, but mainly by having some sort of a model that works as a scanner. So it's just there is a hidden mark in there, and we want to scan it with some decoding model. And when we are able to scan these watermarks or fingerprints or like these hidden things that we inserted in the image or the text, if we are able to scan them and detect them, we can say that this is a deepfake, because we have already tried to insert these watermarks in the original images or the generated images or generated text.
That basically means me as a person, if I see something on Facebook, which is a video which I'm not sure is real, I would need a decoder to tell for sure if it is deepfake or not, if it was done with a really well-trained model.
Yes, and that's why we assume that this determination of whether it's a deepfake or not would probably be done by some centralized authority. Like if it's maybe the social media platform like Facebook, for example, or maybe the news agencies that are receiving some images and they want to make, or videos, and they want to make sure that image is true or not. So I think it's important to keep that network or the decoder that tries to scan or decode the watermarks sort of secret, in order to not make it very accessible to malicious actors. And that's why I think it's probably the role of content moderation in general, in order to verify the veracity or verify the authenticity of the generated media and compared with true media.
So you're saying that if a malicious actor were to get hold of the decoder, he or she could actually try to work around this fingerprinting technique?
It's possible. It might open some sort of directions of attacks. They might adapt the generation in order, like keep editing the image until the watermark is not detectable anymore, for example, or maybe train something else in order to remove the effect of the watermark. So I think it opens new directions, and that's why probably we should say that it should be centralized and should be kept for maybe trusted authorities, like the as I said, the news agencies that they are sort of credible, and the social media platforms, for example.
Mm-hmm. So I'm not sure if this will get too technical very fast, but how, if this is not observable by eye, how would something be added to the picture that a decoder could see? How does this fingerprinting in your case work?
Okay, so for images, for example, you will actually be surprised that we don't observe that many small details in the image. So, and it works for compression, right? So if we have some sort of like JPEG images, and if it's not severely compressed, you probably wouldn't see the difference, right? So it's sort of the same. So our eyes are not very sensitive to very small fine details. And if we add certain patterns, maybe certain noise patterns to the image with a small amount, we wouldn't be able to observe it with our own eyes, but a model can do that. A model that is able to decode or observe these differences. So it's sort of like we are exploiting our imperfect visual system in a way. That's for images and videos.
But what if I were to compress a picture that has a fingerprint? Like if there's a picture that comes out of a model that is fingerprinted, and I were to compress it in a different way, would that kind of impair the fingerprint? Would it remove it? Or is it like robust enough that like uploading it to social media, which always entails some kind of compression, would not really destroy the fingerprint?
Yes, that's a very good question, because actually, like for all these watermarking and fingerprinting work, you have to really make sure that you have some sort of robustness to these degradations that could be done naturally, like compression, or could be done with the intention of actually removing the watermarks or the fingerprints. So currently for images, for example, we studied like some range of attacks or perturbations that someone can apply either naturally, like the compression, or with the intention of removing the watermarks. So this could be like probably compression, applying compression, or maybe cropping the image, changing some parts in it, and so on. And we found that for images, there are some sort of robustness to small details, small changes. And of course, if you change the image dramatically and you just destroyed it or like blurred it completely, then probably you would lose the watermark, but you would also lose the quality of the image. So it's just we assume that there is some capabilities of the attackers here, of the malicious actor, and they still want to have some sort of high quality image, and they still want to have sort of a high usability from the model itself. Right.
So that's what you said. It's always kind of a game between keeping it as high quality as possible, because you want to fool people if you are doing like a deep fake with bad faith, but you also want to have it as undetectable as possible. So if an attacker tries to remove the fingerprint, they might also destroy the use for their image in this case.
Yes, exactly. But for text, it's harder, definitely. It's a bit harder because like if you see some original text and if you see an edited version of it, you would see the difference. If we are editing the words, because it's more observable to us, we would probably see the difference. And that's why I would say it's very challenging to watermark text compared to watermarking images, but it's still doable. So, but requires a lot of work around it.
Yeah, so I can imagine readings. I'm not sure. Maybe I might have already read some texts that were computer generated, but I could imagine that it's quite hard to get like a natural sounding grammar or sounding sentence flow.
Yes. So I would say currently it's actually very impressive. We see computer-generated text that is actually very, very impressive. And there were a lot of like research papers that reported that they had user studies, and they have shown users or people computer-generated text and real text, and actually the scoring was a bit comparable. And the detection of human-generated for computer-generated text is still very limited at the moment. These models are trained on. The idea here is that these models are trained on very, very large amount of data. And the training details of it is a bit different than training GANs. So I'm not sure if we want to go into the details of this, but they are sort of, maybe in a very nutshell, they are trained to predict the next word. So it's similar to the computer keyword suggestions, or like the
like autocorrect.
Exactly, yeah. The autocorrect, because they are trained to predict the next word given the previous word, and by this training strategy, they are able to implicitly learn the grammar and learn the coherency and learn a lot of different characteristics of the true language. And currently, these models, the language generation models, are getting bigger, and they are trained on like a huge amount of training data. And that's why they are getting really better in generating text that actually sound meaningful to us and correct in terms of grammar and so on.
But you really don't have to, I mean, as you said, in an image, you can sort of hide a fingerprint with, I don't know, edit image noise, or I don't know, some pixels that might even be too small for us to see. But in the text, at least I can imagine that it is very hard to hide a word or a letter without people noticing it.
Yes. So the idea here is that we want to shift the distribution a little bit in a way of the language, in a way that it's still meaningful and still correct, but at the same time we can hide information using this distributional shifting. So it's sort of like if there are two ways to express a word or to express a meaning, for example, using synonyms, there are two words that could mean the same thing, and using this strategy, we can, when we say we want to use something instead of the other, we can hide this information, like transform this into some sort of bits of zeros and ones, and using this distribution of words, we can hide this information.
Can you actually think of a scenario where a deepfake text could be dangerous? I mean, with pictures and with videos, I think it's fairly easy to grasp why they are dangerous, why they can be faked and spread around the internet as disinformation. I mean, we've seen it in the past, but with a text, I mean, everyone could basically write a text and say, okay, this text was written by that guy, and you don't really have to believe it because it's just a written text. So is there a scenario where you think a deepfake computer-generated text could be as dangerous as an faked image or a faked video?
Well, so the idea here is that, yes, everyone can write a text, but these generation technologies, text generation technologies, they could make it so much easier for malicious actors in order to write high quality text. So they don't have to invest so many time and so many hours trying to write an article that supports a certain claim they have in mind, where they can just insert that claim to a model and the model would generate a full article that supports that claim. So for example, if we want to make some sort of misinformation that there is a study that links some dangerous effects of vaccination, for example, and I think this is probably a common topic nowadays, I guess. So instead of investing so many time in writing this, the malicious actor in that case can just insert this headline, give it as an input to the model, and then the model can generate up to entire articles that seem very convincing. So I think the risk here is to be able to generate this kind of misinformation at scale and with accessible technology, and it would just make it so much easier for attackers.
So what you're saying is basically that the danger does not lie in the text, but in the scale of how these texts can be distributed in a sheer number of like a really barrage of fake news. And I don't know, we've seen in the past that there are like these troll farms of people that are paid to write comments in social media that serve a cause, like a certain cause, like disinformation or propaganda to support a state, or support, as you said, vaccine disinformation. So do you think that this is something where also these text generating models could be used?
Yes, I think so. And I think it's a very realistic use case and threat to consider. So the text itself is dangerous because it contains misinformation, as we said, but it's also dangerous because it could be done in an automatic way and at a very large scale. So it would just be so much easier to do this, and instead of writing the actual misinformation by humans.
So you could basically fake a whole grassroots campaign where you just simulate like a politician having a large base of support for something that is not real. So the support isn't real, but there are just a lot of comments, a lot of texts saying that they support him.
Yes, exactly.
It's just generated by a model.
Yes, exactly. So you can try to make sure that the model generation supports a certain claim that you have in mind, and it's maybe directed towards that sort of propaganda.
Okay, that sounds really dangerous. So I think it would be a good idea to have a sort of fingerprinting with which social media or other companies could tell them from the real thing. Okay, if we maybe get back to the pictures that you were talking about, like the pictures that are generated with this certain model that has a fingerprint. So if this picture has a fingerprint of this model, that means my decoder can tell that this picture was generated by this model. Do I understand it correctly?
Yes, exactly.
Okay, so but that also means that the fingerprint does already have to be added during creation in the model, right? Mm-hmm. Okay, so wouldn't that mean that a bad actor that is building their own model could just leave a fingerprint out and there would be like no way for us to tell if it's a deepfake or not?
So you mean that the bad actor can just skip this process, skip our fingerprinting process?
Yeah, I mean, if a bad actor builds their own model.
Yes, exactly.
There would be like really no motivation for him or her to add a fingerprint so others could tell it apart, right?
Yes. So I think this comes to the point that I was mentioning earlier about nowadays it's getting harder to train these models. So even as researchers, it's getting harder for us because it requires a lot of hardware that it could be not accessible to everyone. And there is also extensive knowledge there that is required in order to train and sort of tune these models. And also it requires huge amount of data. And there are already some companies out there that they don't open source their trained models. So, for example, OpenAI, if you already heard about the latest text generation technologies like GPT-3 currently. So this is not open sourced as a model and as a trained weights or like even as code, for example. And it's only accessible through black box APIs. So we are talking about this scenario where it's so hard to actually train these models by individual players, and they can just be accessible only through some sort of black box service, or like for the text generation, for example. And this was our main assumption in the text watermarking work. What we did in watermarking GANs or images was a little bit different, is that we assumed that, okay, a person can have the trained model, but we also assumed that so it's not a black box service, but the person wouldn't be in charge of actually training the model themselves. So we would be releasing the trained model that we were sort of in control of training. Just to clarify, I think there are two options in adding the watermarks. We can add it as a post-processing step. So we will leave the model as it is, and we will not intervene sort of with training the model, and we will add it as a post-processing. And this is what we've done in the text, because it's relatively easier to actually do it as a post-processing and to not sort of interfere with the model training. And this would work if it's a black box API, that as I was mentioning, and actually in the real case example that we actually have a black box API that do this sort of text generation technology.
So black box API basically means I have a tool that I use, but I'm not seeing behind the curtain what this tool does. Yes,
exactly. So you don't have the model itself, and you cannot skip this post-processing step because you just take the output. So this is what we did in the text generation watermarking, but in watermarking GANs or images, we did it in a little bit different way. So you can still take the model itself, like you can have sort of a white box access, or the inverse, or like the opposite of black box. You can still take the model that we trained, but you are not the one, or like the malicious actor will not be the one responsible for training the model. So they cannot change the training process that we have already did. And in that case, we don't do it in a post-processing way. We just watermark the model itself. Our choice was for the post-processing in case of text, because it's generally harder to watermark text due to the discrete nature and due to the differences in how the two models are, the two technologies are trained. But for training images, it can be done. It's convenient and it's feasible to do it while training the model itself, not as a post-processing step.
Okay, yeah, that makes sense. So, but the idea behind this is that with this fingerprint, you can tell that the image is from this certain model. So it's not only you can say that it is deepfake, but you can also trace it back to the model it was generated with. Is that right?
Yes. So this is actually useful if we, for example, a company that is responsible for selling this model to probably different actors, and if they want to be able to trace basically who actually released this or who misused the model itself, they can trace it to a certain model instead of just generally say that it's a deepfake.
Okay, so it also adds like a sense of security for a company that is selling this model in a commercial way, because so would it also be possible for them to tell who exactly has been misusing their model? So is there could there be like a customer ID written in the fingerprint?
Yeah, so it could work in that way. So instead of having a single fingerprint that's added to all models and it's deployed to all people, you can have a specific fingerprint that's deployed to each client. By then, if you actually decode that specific fingerprint, then you can trace it back to the specific client and know who actually probably leaked this wrong information. And I think we call it the responsible disclosure of models, because in a way we want to enable these technology owners to be able to release their models in a way that makes it easier for them to trace the misuse and know if misuse is happening and actually trace it to the actual clients or actual people who did it.
Yeah, so it also makes sense for them, I mean, even talking business-wise, because it's way easier to sell it if they can discourage people from misusing it. So, I mean, you've been working on these techniques for a while. And have you already been in contact with these companies, or are they actually interested in your research, or is it more of an afterthought for them and they're like, yeah, let's do the model and we'll think about this afterwards? Or I mean, how's the is there some sort of communication already with
No. So I think we are hoping, like, I still think these ideas of watermarking, I'm so excited about it, but I think they are still probably in the early phases. So there are a lot of changes that need to be faced currently at the moment, but I think it has a lot of potential. And currently, one also direction would be the cooperation of different stakeholders in that area. So, as I said, the news agencies and social media platforms, and also like the technology owners and the people who release and train these generation technologies. But currently, I would still say it's in early phases for these defenses or tools to be implemented in a real world scenario, sort of.
And what about the future? I mean, let's say in 5 years, this will be released and social media companies, news companies will use it. Do you think that this will spark like another cat and mouse game that we already often have in cybersecurity? That is basically some company or entity trying to secure something and another actor trying to crack that security, overcome it. Do you think as soon as these models, these fingerprinting models will be released, that other people are going to try to, work around them?
It is possible, I would say, honestly, that they might work around them. But I think the odds of that happening is probably better than the cat and mouse game that's already there for deepfakes already. And it would help in this cat and mouse game to actually work on improving these watermarks and maybe applying it to a different range of applications. So currently for images, for example, we applied it to image generation and some editing applications, but we still, for example, didn't do it for videos. And I was also, I think there are also a lot of open directions of improving the quality of watermarks in text and improving its diversity. So if we already reached a good level of a diverse watermarking system, that's it's not so easy to predict. For example, in text, it's not so easy to predict to what are the watermarking patterns because it's diverse and because it's very natural. Then I would say that we probably would have better chances in the fight of misinformation than not relying on watermarking.
Yeah, so maybe we could just say, as a summary, if someone really, really badly wants to spread disinformation that is watermarking proof, like let's say a bad acting country that has really a lot of resources, they still can build their own systems and release deepfakes that are not watermarked, but like a really, really large part of the population that does not have this expert knowledge and relies on existing models to build deepfakes, they will kind of lose their credibility if a watermarking system is implemented in these models.
Yes, of course. So I think it possibly wouldn't sort of eliminate all possible risks, but it would definitely limit them and would definitely decrease their chances of happening.
Then I think you should definitely keep on working on that, because
thank you.
That is really interesting, and I think it would really help our society if there would be less disinformation instead of more. So thank you very much. And for the end, we just have 5 quick questions that I would like to ask you. So do you use a password manager? And if yes, why? And if no, why not?
I do, because I find it useful that they can suggest strong password and randomized password for every website. And for me, it's sort of like hard to do this manually and hard to keep track. And they could also be useful and give you warnings about phishing URLs, for example.
Okay. I think that's good advice, yeah. So do you, have you ever fallen for a phishing email yourself?
No, I worked on phishing for a while. So I'm actually extra cautious about it. So the first thing that I check whenever someone sends me a URL, even like if I know that person really well, the first thing I check is that I know the website. And I'm very cautious about like the emails that I get. I think I remember even I got an email from someone at CISPA and I didn't know the email, and I was like, and they were asking me for system information. So I thought, okay, is that from CISPA? And I kept like maybe searching for the name and making sure, while the email is CISPA.de, so it should make sense that that's someone from CISPA. But I was probably obsessed about it that I kept making sure that it's actually true, not a phishing email.
So it's better to be safe than sorry. I think that's something we all can learn when it comes to cybersecurity, right? So you're working in cybersecurity. Does that have any effect on how you handle your private data? I mean, when it comes to social media and text messengers and so on?
Okay, so I would say like I'm trying to be more cautious about my online presence on social media, but honestly, I still use Instagram and Facebook, and I still have my photos there. Although I know that probably these photos might be crawled for some reason, and they might be used for like training facial recognition system, for example. But I would say I still use them.
Yeah, I mean, we're all still humans, even if we're working in
yeah.
cybersecurity. Okay. Do you have a smart home?
I have Alexa. That's like as far as I have in the smart home system. So I use it just to keep alarms and stuff.
Okay. And how do you feel about cryptocurrencies, and have you ever invested personally?
I didn't. And I sort of don't have enough knowledge on them. And I did invest in them because I feel like I also have to invest a lot of time in understanding them. Just keeping track of everything. So time is not available resource for me at the moment. So no, I didn't invest in them.
So Sahar, thank you very, very much for taking the time to be here today. I've had a lot of fun, and I think I've learned a lot of things, and hopefully our listeners will do so as well.
Thanks a lot. It's really a nice opportunity, and I enjoyed it very much.
Thank you very much. Keep doing your research, and I'm sure we will talk again in the future.
Thank you.
Goodbye.
Bye.
Have a good day.